Good morning. Welcome to Gimpy's History Corner. I'm called Gimpy by my family. These are my grandsons, Alice and Archie, with their aunt and uncle, Scott and Casey, over the summer at a putt-putt golf course. So, this is video number 105. I entitled it Government Intervention in Labor Unrest. We've talked about the different strikes, traditional strikes, sit-down strikes, and this video focuses more on what the government did about it. Okay, we're going to start with strike breaking and suppression, 1800s to 1900. The Gilded Age was filled with labor suppression. Government often sided with the industrialists. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877, President Hayes sent in troops. The Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania, I think that was a steelworker strike. President Harrison would not send in troops, so the governor of Pennsylvania sent in troops. The state militia. Homestead Strike, 1892. Lots of violence there. A lot of shooting. And the Pullman Strike of 1894. That was President Cleveland sent in troops. So governors and presidents sided with the owners of the factories to keep the commerce going. Commerce must keep going, they said. We cannot stop commerce. That's good for the country. Legal hostility, courts issued injunctions against unions, and the Sherman Antitrust Act was initially used against labor organizing, which I did not know. Now, the big swing came with Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Rex, where he, rather than sending in troops, he had them ready to go if necessary, but he wanted to try something else first. He tried neutral mediation, where he established a coal strike commission, where you had members from both sides, and they got together to work out an agreement rather than striking. And it worked. Theodore Roosevelt's intervention in the anthracite coal strike of 1902 marked a shift. Rather than breaking the strike, he brought both sides to the White House and used a commission of labor as a fact finder to broker a deal. It was the first time the federal government was used as a mediator in a labor dispute. I want to read some. This is Edmund Morris. Some weeks after the Coal Strike Commission had begun its work and anthracite fires were glowing in 40 million grates, George Bear encountered Owen Wister and roared at him, "Does your friend ever think," I guess that's the question, does your friend ever think? He's talking about Roosevelt. The railroad executive was still furious over Roosevelt's impetuous intervention between free market forces. Even the most conservative economic experts were predicting that the United Mine Workers would win at least a 10% wage increase, plus fairer and safer conditions and the right to arbitrate all disputes. "He certainly does seem to act," Wister replied. The rest of the world seemed to agree. Theodore Roosevelt's mediation between capital and labor earned him fame as the first head of state to confront the largest problem of the 20th century. He was cheered in the French Chamber of Deputies and hailed by the Times of London as a political original. In a most quiet and unobtrusive manner, the president has done a very big and entirely new thing. We are witnessing not merely the ending of the coal strike, but the definite entry of the powerful government upon a novel sphere of operation. So Teddy Roosevelt, rather than send in their troops, let's try something else. Let's try a coal commission and work out a deal. But as you can see, some of the coal mine owners did not like it because they had to give up wage increases, which decreased their profits. Okay, 1930s and 40s, this was the New Deal. It was Teddy Roosevelt's relative, Franklin Roosevelt, had the New Deal, labor laws and federal oversight. 1935, National Labor Relations Act guaranteed right to unionize and bargain collectively and created the National Labor Relations Board to oversee disputes. So they took the idea from Teddy and created the NLRB to act as a federal mediator. Same idea. Good job, Teddy. The Railway Labor Act of 1926 had given the federal government authority to intervene in railway and later airlines labor disputes to prevent disruptions to commerce. Just like Reagan said, you can't disrupt commerce. You're a safety employee. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 allowed the president to impose an 80-day cooling-off period in strikes deemed as a national emergency. So part of the things unions are thinking, saying, hey, we work in a field where the government needs us. The country needs us. So we are primed to win concessions if we say we're going to strike because the government needs us. The country needs us. So we deserve better pay, and we can strike and get better pay because the government needs us. Well, the Taft-Hartley Act said the president can impose an 80-day cooling off period. In other words, keep working 80 days, and the NLRB could work on a mediation to work out an agreement. Cold War and defense industry strikes. It's during World War II. And the Cold War defense industry strikes led to presidential intervention. So we got World War II going on and needing all the stuff from the factories to fight the war against the Nazis and the Japanese. And unions were going on strike, and the government wanted to keep the war effort going, so they intervened. The Smith-Connolly Act of 1943, the War Labor Dispute Act, gave President power to seize and operate industries where strikes threatened war production. I don't know. World War II was important. Defeating the Nazis was important. Defeating the Japanese was important. So I can see that. And it worked the other way too. Montgomery Ward seizure of 1944, FDR sent in troops when the CEO of Montgomery Ward did not comply with the Ward Labor Board directives. So the guy in charge of Montgomery Ward did not like Roosevelt. And he just said, I'm going to ignore what he says. I'm going to run my company the way I want to, and I don't want to give in to the union. I don't want to give in and give the workers more money. It's my company. You can't tell me not to do it. Well, it was wartime, so Roosevelt sent in the troops and said, yes, I can. It's a shame. The War Production Board of World War II, 1942, coordinated industrial production during the war and gave control of companies to the federal government. Again, I don't know. Companies are run by people, and people have egos, and they have political opinions. And if they didn't like Roosevelt, they tried to do what they wanted to do because they were tough guys and they were egotistical in running their own company. They didn't care about what was best for the country. They just wanted to stick it to Roosevelt. So the War Production Board basically made decisions for them during the war, and then once the war is over, they went back to normal. Okay, so the federal government started out as being tough on labor, sending in troops to make them work. Teddy Roosevelt, at the turn of the century, with the coal strike, started a new type of intervention. Rather than sending in troops, you create a NLRB to mediate. I dealt with a state level NLRB. I think it's called SERB, S-E-R-B, State something Relations Board. Can't remember what it was called, but we had one negotiations where we had a guy who worked for the state, came in to mediate a labor dispute with teachers. He did a great job. You know, it was settled pretty quickly. There wasn't a strike or anything, but both sides just said, we want a third party to come in to help us out. And he came in and just said, at one point, I remember he had, there was a union proposal for something, I can't remember what it was. And he just said, I think this one needs to go into the, and it fell off the table, into the trash can. That's a non-starter. So we're not going to deal with that one. And the union said, okay. I don't know, that was kind of risky. He might have started a strike there for all I know, but they backed off and said, okay. So that meant that was one of those requests that was up here. They were willing to give it up to get what they really wanted down here. That's part of the negotiations, figuring out what is a deal breaker and just something they hope to get if possible. So I've dealt with those, and they, at least in the situation I was in, it was very helpful. So the Roosevelts, Teddy got it started with the anthracite coal strike in 1902, and his relative Franklin continued that during the war by using the War Labor Board to run the companies during the war to get the things needed to end the war. Once the war was over, they backed off, and unions started declining after the war. Okay, this is Saturday. I think the Buckeyes play Purdue today. Play them Boilermakers. Let's hope the Buckeyes can beat those Boilermakers today. Thank you. Have a great day.